涿州与北京的交界处。
This is the border between Zhou and Beijing. I rode my motorcycle here, and I couldn't pass, only through the checkpoint. There are barbed wire fences everywhere. Beijing is on the other side. This village belongs to Zhou, but access is blocked. It's surreal, completely unbelievable.
来，我们现在后面的这个铁栏杆栅栏是能看得到的，对吧？
You can see the iron bars and barbed wire behind us, right? Beyond the fence is Beijing. Our current spot is in Hebei. This side is blocked with metal panels. Do you know why? This is the Beijing-Tianjin border. On this side is Beijing. Over there, the farmland belongs to Wuqing County, Tianjin. A resident from Beijing suburbs also said he only recently realized there are walls between Beijing and neighboring provinces.
这道墙不是监狱，不是柏林墙，也不是国境线。
This isn't a prison, the Berlin Wall, or a national border. It's a boundary between Beijing's Daxing district and Langfang. Provincial borders were once theoretical and freely crossed. Now they're physical and nearly impossible to cross. Made of barbed wire, metal panels, and rotating spikes, it's extremely sturdy. Village roads and township roads are all cut off. Only a few main roads allow Hebei residents into Beijing. Checkpoints line these roads, with long daily queues. Whoever set this up probably sees every Hebei person as a potential threat. Travelers from outside the city were surprised to see that Hebei was walled off. This barrier isolates entire villages. One person wondered if Beijing fears that Hebei residents might rebel. Even travel to the US is easier than entering Beijing. A local auxiliary police officer told a user that the barbed wire had been there for a long time. The old fence was replaced with a new one. The checkpoint has existed for years. To enter Beijing, you must go through the checkpoint. You cannot cross freely. A village resident explained that this started during the pandemic and has continued. Even after the pandemic ended, the barrier was not removed. Now there are extra layers of fencing that are patrolled regularly. This wall is called the outer defense line. During the pandemic, Beijing strictly controlled the movement of Hebei residents. Many high-ranking officials live in Beijing, and their safety is very important. That's why the zero-COVID policy was enforced. The wall may also check identities to ensure visitors are not petitioners or infected. After the pandemic, the wall was reinforced, patrolled, and strictly maintained. Warning signs on the wall state, damaging the outer defense line will incur 10 times the compensation. Serious violations will be legally prosecuted. Surveillance cameras and broadcast warnings remind people not to cross. Many Chinese people, even from nearby Hebei, could barely believe the wall exists. Online users commented that Xi Jinping must feel insecure. His fear seems obsessive. He treats all citizens as enemies. The wall is not just to keep Hebei people out, but everyone outside Beijing. Beijing is now a country within China. This is to prevent outsiders from entering the imperial city. Former mayor of Beijing, Tai Chi's policy cleared low-end populations. People can still enter by plane or high-speed train, but not by road. Some people joke that Beijing might be declaring independence. Soon, residents from second-tier cities will need special routes to enter Beijing. The government fears an influx of people rising up. They have created a buffer zone to protect themselves. They must be held accountable for the harm they have done. One user noted that in the eyes of authorities, Hebei residents are expendable. The infamous Hebei flood incident is a stark example. In August 2023, the remnants of Typhoon Doksuri caused heavy rains across northern China. Authorities ordered flood discharges, which turned Hebei into a disaster zone. State media, including CCTV, downplayed the events. They blamed the floods only on heavy rain. This drew accusations of hiding the truth. Officials reportedly used Hebei as a buffer for Beijing, which fueled public anger. Mainland scholars on Twitter noted that the Hebei flood was not to protect upstream Beijing. It was to safeguard Xiong'an and preserve Xi Jinping's image, which required controlled flooding midstream. A Bloomberg article highlighted a Chinese song praising former leader Deng Xiaoping. In 1979, Deng drew a large circle on southern China's map and established Shenzhen as a testing ground for capitalism. 40 years later, Xi Jinping announced his own ambitious city project near Beijing, the Xiong'an New Area. State media hailed it as a high-tech metropolis and a model city in human development history. It was designed as a secondary hub for the overcrowded capital. Yet just across the levee, Xiong'an remained untouched by water while Baozhou City was flooded. During that disaster, Hebei's role as a sacrificial victim became deeply ingrained in the public mind. Online, users parodied Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, creating the 3 laws of Hebei people. First law, Hebei residents must not harm Beijing, Tianjin, or Xiong'an residents, nor allow them to be harmed. Second law, Hebei residents must obey orders from Beijing, Tianjin, or Xiong'an residents unless it conflicts with the first law. Third law, provided the first and second laws are not violated, Hebei residents might protect themselves. In short, Hebei residents are expected to protect Beijing, serving the privileged Communist Party elite while remaining the first victims. More Chinese are awakening to the reality that, in the eyes of the powerful nation's rulers, they have long been seen as low-end, disposable people. Recently, a retired soldier in Henan spoke out, saying he would never return to the battlefield if war breaks out again. He lamented that after leaving the military, he had become someone powerless, unable to protect even his basic property, a personal electric vehicle, amid recent violent confiscations and crackdowns. Online users praised his candor, saying it exposed the Communist Party's long-standing propaganda glorifying heroes. In reality, the government extorts the lower class, seizes private property, and strips away dignity, all while expecting citizens to sacrifice themselves in crises. The veterans' awakening, they said, was a sharp rebuke to Beijing. Travelers from outside Beijing also reported that entering the city does not guarantee free movement, especially near Tiananmen in recent days. Up ahead is Tiananmen, but you must make a reservation to enter. Security is tight, with multiple checkpoints. Access to the National Museum also requires booking a day in advance. You cannot get in without it. This year marks the 37th anniversary of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. The Tiananmen Mothers, a group of bereaved families, remain a key target of the Chinese Communist Party's suppression and tight control. Spokesperson Yeo Wei-jie said that as early as late April, officials began closely monitoring the families, even those approaching 90 years old. In 1989, the CCP killed large numbers of students and citizens in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. They had demanded democracy and freedom. Many families later campaigned for justice. 2 mothers, Ding Ziling and Zhang Xianling, lost their sons in the massacre. They co-founded the Tiananmen Mothers organization. For years, the group had spoken the truth and sought justice for their loved ones. They have faced relentless government repression. According to Radio France Internationale, after her husband Jiang Pei-kun passed away in 2015, Ding Ziling was placed under near-constant surveillance. Her contact with the outside world was severely restricted. Yeo Wei-jie later became the group's spokesperson. This year, Yeo Wei-jie said communication remains tightly controlled ahead of June 4th. She told RFI that authorities deployed security measures earlier than usual. They gave special attention to Ding Ziling and Zhang Xianling, both nearly 90. Yeo Wei-jie explained that Ding Ziling is now hard of hearing. She can no longer take phone calls or give interviews. Officials still maintain long-term surveillance outside her home to prevent contact with journalists. Zhang Xianling is also approaching 90. She struggles with mobility and uses walking aids. But her mind and speech remain sharp, which makes her a prime target for strict monitoring. Yeo Wei-jie noted that although this year is not a major anniversary, the early deployment may be linked to U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to China in mid-May. Officials reportedly stationed personnel near Zhang Xianling's residence and at elevator entrances as early as late April. This was about 2 weeks earlier than the usual mid-May security setup. Yeo Wei-jie herself returned to Beijing with her family in early May. She was warned not to speak to journalists and was followed by plainclothes officers. When she protested, the surveillance temporarily stopped. Normally, officials station personnel outside her home 1 week before June 4th. She reflected on the 37 years since the massacre. She lamented that many original members of the Tiananmen Mothers have passed away without seeing justice. She vowed that surviving families would continue the fight. She said even if she ends up alone, she'll persevere and never give up. Radio Free Asia reported that on the eve of the 37th anniversary, Beijing authorities notified Tiananmen Mother members that they could not visit Wang'an Cemetery on June 4th or hold the usual memorial. On June 1st, bereaved families issued a protest letter. They stated that the restrictions violated the Constitution, the law, and basic humanity. They demanded that bans be lifted. This marks the first time in over 30 years that families were forbidden to visit the cemetery. Tiananmen Mother Zhang Xiangling said on June 2nd, "Now, they won't let us go to Wang'an Cemetery. We're not allowed to read memorial texts or give speeches. The usual rituals are forbidden. We can't even go there at all. This has never happened before." For over 30 years, the Tiananmen Mothers have demanded the CCP disclose the truth, hold those responsible accountable, and provide compensation. Each year, around the anniversary, families, victims, dissidents, rights advocates, and some former political prisoners face varying degrees of surveillance, questioning, duty assignments, and forced travel. Online users noted that, as the 37th anniversary approached, mainland social media platforms like WeChat, QQ, Pinduoduo, and Douyin entered system maintenance mode. Features such as personal data modification were temporarily suspended. Even in-game chat and voice-to-text functions were disabled. On Weibo, the phrase Crazy Thursday was banned. X users mocked the authorities. They are treating every shadow as a threat. Everyone knows June 4th is a national holiday for Chinese servers. Another said the CCP is built on lies and has done far too much evil. The CCP has also tried to spread its fear of June 4th abroad. Just before the anniversary, Jie Liajian, chairman of the China Democracy Party International Alliance, who coordinates commemorations around the world, was involved in a serious car accident on May 31st. In a June 3rd interview, Jie Liajian said that the days before the crash, he had taken part in protests against Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to the U.S. At the same time, he was coordinating several June 4th events. He recounted the accident. It happened in a remote part of Utah. He moved aside to let the other car pass, but the driver hit his vehicle. They struck twice, first at the rear, and then at the front, and then drove away. The area is desert and has few people. There are not many cameras, so it's easy to escape. He described the crash. The car spun out of control, its wheels flew off. It crossed into oncoming lanes, smashed through guardrails, and finally slid into the wilderness before it stopped. Only later, when he regained consciousness, did he learn that witnesses had come right away to help and report what happened. Highway patrol officers who saw the scene were shocked. They kept saying, "Thank God, thank God." They feared there would be more deaths because of the vehicle's condition. Jie Liajian emphasized that the accident was not sudden. Unusual events had taken place days before. His landlord, who is usually calm, suddenly panicked. The landlord demanded they move immediately because of pressure from family in China. What unsettled him most was not the crash itself, it was a call from his family afterward. He told reporters that his family urged him to return home. They claimed he was not safe abroad, but he had not contacted them directly. How could they know what happened? He noted that this strongly suggests harassment by the CCP linked to his experiences overseas. The crash is the latest in a series of CCP harassment incidents against Jie Liajian in the U.S. over the past year, yet he remains optimistic. He said this year's June 4th commemorations show an encouraging trend. More young people are actively paying attention to this history. He observed that many young people in China are finding creative ways to bypass censorship. They use subtle language to commemorate the event safely. For example, some say, "June 4th is my birthday. Anyone want to celebrate with me?" Others say, "Let's ride bicycles to Beijing together." Everyone understands that riding bicycles itself is a symbolic reference to June 4th. In the early hours of June 4th, Beijing time, the U.S. Embassy in China shared on X a bilingual statement from the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, displayed in a white text on a black background. It read, "On June 4th, the world marks 37 years since the Chinese Communist Party ordered its troops to attack thousands of peaceful demonstrators in and around Tiananmen Square. Chinese students, workers, and other civilians who lost their lives had gathered to exercise their natural rights and demand democratic reforms and accountability for corruption. We remember their lives and honor their legacy. No amount of censorship can erase the past. Those who sacrifice to uphold their unalienable rights of free expression and peaceful assembly will be vindicated someday." Commentators note that the CCP not only seeks to turn Beijing into a state within a state, it also tries to enclose all of China into a digital prison. Yet these efforts fail. Barbed wire in Beijing only fuels public anger and resistance. The Great Firewall sharpens the understanding of the CCP's cruelty among those who know the truth. On sensitive anniversaries like June 4th, this reality becomes clear. Each day ahead may itself become a sensitive day for Beijing's rulers.